Welcome again to Family Dynamics with Bola. On today's episode, I will be talking about something that I find really interesting, something that I've gone through, something I feel like at a point in time as parents will go through. I'm going to be talking about moving from obedience to ownership as we raise kids who take responsibility. So moving them from obedience, just them obeying us, to ownership. It's a shift that I feel like at some point in time, every parent will have to feel that shift, right? When our kids are little, it's very easy for us to give them a prompt: brush your teeth, go eat your food, clean up after yourself, say thank you, please, and all that. And that does really work. It does work, right? For a while. As they grow, we don't want them to just obey us, right? We want something much more than them complying with the rules and regulations that we set for them. We want them to be able to make wise decisions, right? That's what we want. We want them to do the right thing, even when we're not there and when no one is watching them. We want them to do the right thing when no one is watching them, right? And that's what today's episode is all about. How, as parents, we can raise children who don't just follow rules, who don't just do things just because we ask them to do it, but children who take ownership of their own decisions, of their values, of their future, right? We know that obedience is the first step to wisdom, but obedience has to lead to understanding. And as parents, we want to teach our children to obey not just our voices, but that voice of wisdom within them, right? So I'll start with a story. I love story. So I was discussing with one of my friend, and she was just telling me how recently a 13-year-old son who's always been a really good kid, especially when you live in a developed country, a good, you can vouch for your child, makes you really proud. So she was telling me, she's like, this my really good kid who follows the rules, who get good grades. They don't even talk back. She was always, I know she's always talking about that child. And sometimes when we get together, we see how good, and some of us will be like, wow, how is a boy this good? And the mom was always just really bragging about him. But, she was telling me this story, and I have a permission to share this. She's like, one day she found out that this boy has not been doing his own work. It's not that he forgot, but he was hiding it intentionally from the parents. And, it will be like, oh, have you done your homework? He will be like, yes. But he wasn't doing it. She was so heartbroken. Like, how? How does this child, my good child, how do they intentionally lie, not doing their homework, hide this truth from me, right? She's like, I thought this boy knew better. She was telling me this was my obedient child out of all these kids. And that's when it hit her that obedience is not the same thing as taking ownership. It's not the same thing as taking charge and being responsible for your actions, right? This guy followed the rules when the mama is there, but he had not really internalized why. And that's why it's really key. Sometimes when our kids ask us why, and then we get really angry, no, we have to tell them why this matter. This guy, it needed more than consequences. Oh, if you don't do this, this will happen. He needed that guidance to help him to really, this thing that we're telling them to do. He needed that guidance to grow from him just obeying to actually taking responsibility. So What does this shift look like? I'll just talk about maybe two or three key differences between, child obeying and them taking ownership. The first thing is obedience is external, but ownership is internal. When a child obey, it's all about them doing what they've been told to do. They don't know why, and sometimes they know why, but they just want to do what they need to do, right? Obedience is about doing what you're told to do. Take out the trash, you do it, do your homework. But ownership is about choosing what is right, even without being told. You see something at home that is not in the right place, you put it. Nobody has to see you, or nobody has to say thank you. I know that I have this conversation with my daughter over and over, right? I'm like, I don't want you to just be good just because somebody is watching you. I want you to be good when you feel like nobody is ever going to know. And that's where we want to shift to them to. It's an internal thing, right? Them taking responsibility, choosing what is right without you telling them. And the second difference between obedience and ownership that I want to talk about today is obedience kind of seek approval from the person who is giving that to you. But ownership is about seeking alignment. When your child is obedient, they may ask you, Dad, did I do this right? Mom, did I do it right? But a child who has gotten to that place of ownership, you know, they can ask you, instead of saying, Did I do this right? They would ask, Is this really right for me to do? So when they're with their friends and, their dad and mom is not there and their friend is trying to do something right, a child who was moved from obedience to ownership will be like, Is this right for me to do? Is this the right thing? Is this the right step for me to take? Right? And that's where we want to get our kids to. So let me give you one more difference before I actually share on some of the things that we could do. Obedience is about following rules, and we want our kids to follow the rules, right? But ownership develops their character, and that's where we want to get to. Our goal is not just for them to follow rules. Our goal as parents is to raise kids who can think, raise kids who are leaders, raise kids who are decision makers, right? These parents, they work together. One of my friend was telling me also about their teenage daughter. They've always been firm with their child, they discipline them, they do their chores, they come home when they ought to come home, good kid, right? But then the daughter went to college and the parents started getting calls. This child was skipping classes. They were not submitting the assignment. I mean, they were genuinely perplexed. They're like, we raised this child right. We raised our daughter right. She didn't give us trouble, you know? And that's the difference, right? Between following rule and taking ownership. As soon as that structure was no longer there, the child just really showed that the structure is not there, the behavior is not there. And that's one of the dangers of us stopping at obedience when it comes to our kids. We let them make those mistakes, we give them opportunities, and then we tell them what we need to do. So how do we go about it? How do we really help our children to move from just being obedient children to children who can take ownership of their decisions, right? The first thing is we need to ask them questions that are guiding questions, not just give commands to them. This one took me a while. And to tell you the truth, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. But one of the things that I found over time that I've been doing that I see that it's making some improvement is asking them guiding questions, not just give commands. So in our own place, we have days that, they know that this is the day where you clean your room and all that. Always just like, have you cleaned your room? Did you clean your room and all that? And that was really stressing me. And after I did a research, I switched from clean your room to what do you need to do for you to feel ready for tomorrow. I encourage them to reflect and make decisions. And another thing you could do, some of the practical things that you could do is um, celebrate when they make wise decisions, right? Celebrate it, not just when they follow rules. When you do something that is right without you prompting them, highlight it, right? And when we're giving them praise, we highlight their character, not just their compliance. Not just because, you asked them to do this and they did it, but when you didn't ask them to do something, you've seen how they've honed it, highlight it, make a praise out of it, right? Praise them for doing that. And you could use that as a moment to just say, you see, you're taking ownership. That's really important. And then give them space for consequences. Let them feel the result of their choices until they're able to now make informed decisions. When they do something right or wrong and they see the natural consequence, it teaches them better than any lecture that we may want to give them. Sometimes as you start talking and talking, they just, they zone out. Let them feel the result of their choices. Don't rush to their rescue. Let them practice their freedom in safe places. Let them make their choices about money, about their schedules, about their friendship while they're still in your care, right? As they practice, that's how ownership grows, right? Ownership grows through real practice. When you've taught them their values, you've taught them what is important, then you let them make their choices. When they bring a kind of friend home, and you ask them questions, you might be able to see, okay, what are you doing? Sometimes you just need to, if you feel like they're not making the right choices, ask them prompting questions that might help them to see, okay, maybe I have not really honed what I've been learning over the years, right? As I round this up, I just wanted to remind you that you're not supposed to be the manager of your child forever. You're their coach, you're their guide, you're their safe place. And I do understand that raising kids who would take ownership look like an uphill battle. It requires you letting go of your control and just leaning into trust. But you need to trust what you've done over time because it's also such a beautiful thing singing that you've done your bit, you've infused the value that you want them to inculcate into them. One day you will see them choose what is right, not just because you told them to do that, but because they've become that person who can think independently and who can make decisions that is right for them even when there's no one watching them. Right. Let's close with this affirmation today. Repeat after me if you're able to. I am raising a child who will stand on their own. I release the need for control and I embrace the process of growth. My voice teaches, but their choices will shape them. With grace and faith, I guide them from obedience to ownership. Wasn't that really beautiful? Thank you so much for listening. If this episode really encouraged you, I'd love for you to share it with a parent friend. We're all in this together so that we can raise wholesome kids for the next generation. Thank you. This is Family Dynamics with Bola.